Hi folks, we're Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio, radio, no pictures live stream. Please listen to this as you're driving along in your car or in your truck or earbuds in the train or something like that. Now, in this essay, I'd like to talk about the propaganda blitz all across the Western world, pushing and promoting, and quite heavy-handed pushing, by the way, of mixed race relationships. Now, this idea of multiculturalism, so mass migration into the West. Now, it's only happening in the West, by the way. It's only in the white countries where we're being forced, without our consent, without our agreement, against our will, being forced to take in masses of black, brown peasants into the Western world. There's been the populace in a supposed democracy. The populace hasn't been asked, has never approved on it, and would never have voted for it. Anyway, it's being forced on us. Now, at the same time as the mass migration was occurring, any government policies to do with racial assimilation, as in migrants coming in, racial assimilation and so on, integration, that sort of stuff, that was largely abandoned so that people could set up their own racial and cultural and religious ghettos within the Western world. And this was multiculturalism, and it's so equal. Oh, the equality, the equity. And so as a result, millions upon millions have streamed into the West. All these, they're illiterate in their own language. They've never had a job, never worked. All these peasants coming in, and they're anti-integrating, or tiny proportion now, they're anti-integrating or assimilating in any way. Even after they've done their schooling in the West, they're still not integrated or assimilated. Now, different races integrate differently and at different rates, but the primary source of migrants, the black Africans, the Chinese, the Indians, or the subcontinent, and the Arabs, that they don't integrate very well. If at all. So there is some integration, sure, but other than illegals trying to get married so they can stay or anchor babies, other than that sort of thing, there isn't really much integration. And now, if I go to the most let's call it racially diverse areas of say Sydney, which has really got the most mass migration out of all the cities in Australia. If I go there and look at the people, say on a busy Saturday, go to the main shopping centre, which is really busy, and find a seat somewhere and watch do the people watching type thing. You'd be lucky to see. I've done this a number of times and the integration rate, even amongst friends, let alone marriage partners or young people dating, clearly people who've been born here, the integration rate would be one. If I'm ultra generous, I'd say 2% would be the integration rate. Again, that's even from people who were born here. Their folks come from other countries, but they're born here. Now, if we look at examples from around the world, people from the Indian subcontinent, the Hindus, for example, and also the Muslims coming from Pakistan and Bangladesh, they don't integrate well at all. The integration rate is minuscule. In India, or the Indians, for example, when they move to another country, they are fanatical about keeping their bloodlines pure, and families will disown any young person who wants to marry outside of the Indian genetic diaspora. They want to stay culturally and spiritually pure and genetically pure, and they want to. Now, what this means is that Indians that are fourth, fifth generation born in the West, they've known nothing but the West, in terms of education, and they still will send back to the village of their ancestors for brides, as indeed do people from the Middle East. Even Christians from Lebanon, for example, who came to Australia in the early 1970s during that Civil War time, they're now third generation in Australia. They still send back to Lebanon for husbands and brides. So, and we see this too with the Muslims, the Pakistanis, the Bangladeshis, the Afghanis, all those people from the Middle East, they still send back. Very few will interracially marry. They're absolutely opposed to it. Now, the way the propaganda is pitched is that it's white people. It's those damn fucking fascist white Nazis who won't, racist bigots who won't intermarry. That's simply not true. People do hang around in their own groups. That's true. But the primary resistance, assuming it's is these people want to keep their behaviours from India or wherever they've come from. They want to keep their blood. It's them. They're very, very fixed. I've known Indian families where, say, the girl who's in their third, fourth generation Western born, the girl wants to marry an Anglo guy, for example, a white guy. The family, because they're very much the wider families, all in the second cousins are all there, and they bring out these large family units because mass migration allows them to, so they can just recreate their entire village family life in the West because the mass migration thing is permitted. Now, because of that, the whole wider family is able to excommunicate anyone that steps out of line. So if the daughter, I'm thinking, well, now girl in her early 20s, and she wanted she was dating some white guy and they were getting sweet and wanted to get married and everything. The family was very much against the dating white guys, very much against it, but sort of tolerated it, kind of. But if she went to like a family gathering, she wasn't allowed to bring the white guy. So, but when she announced that she was considering getting married, that was it. She was threatened with being completely disowned. She would be shunned by the entire wider family. Nobody would talk to her. She would have to leave her parents' house, right now, if she didn't back down, and she'd be cut out of the will. Nothing would be left for her. The family in India wouldn't talk to her. She'd be completely cut off. And against that sort of pressure and those sort of threats, most people would crumble, and she certainly did. And so she's had to accept that she's going to marry some Indian guy. There's some arranged marriage from some dude in India who's been brought up. Now she clearly doesn't want to do it, and she understands that nor has she got much of a choice in it, by the way. It's not like there's a lineup of guys and she picks the hottest or picks she's told you will marry this guy, and that's it. So and she is expected to procreate, and so with this guy. So this is how it goes. So the idea that it's a white people's problem or white people bigotry is an absolute grotesque untruth. But nonetheless, the propaganda is absolutely blitz level propaganda, and pretty much every relationship that you see on, whether it's movies or television shows, adverts, particularly product adverts, or adverts in magazines, or even regional newspapers and regional magazines now that only deal with 99% white populations in Australia. They've got everything there is mixed race. So it's an absolute blitz and so this is nothing organic about it. This is centrally planned, and it's happening all across the Western world. The globalist central commissariat has decided this is how it will be as they decide the mass migration. And so they're pushing this mixed race. Now, if I go on I don't take public transport that much. When I do, particularly if it's, say, when schools are coming out or going in or something like that, or it doesn't matter, at any time, anywhere, you see the groups come in. There'll be the Chinese group will come in, and the fucking Indian group, and then the Pakistani group, and the this and that. They all hang around their groups. Even kids like they've been born in Australia. They've hung around in schools. There's lots and lots of white people, but they still congregate in their racial group. And girls are not quite as bad. You will often find a group of girls where there'll be one token, the black kids or the brown kids will have some token white girl, and it'll be some very put upon white girl with red hair and freckles who's treated badly at home and comes from a poor home. So that they'll include her in the group as like the little token mascot white person. So you do see a bit of that, but that's about the extent of it. But you don't see these people hanging around in groups at all. Again, the Lebanese who've been born here and their kids born here, they hang around with the Lebanese, or the Arabic, Arabic generally hang around with the Arabic tribal group, and it just goes on. So now, given the amount of mass migration and the amount of time it's been going on, you think you would start seeing some integration. But again, in places where, say, Indians were arriving in large numbers in the 1850s, as an example. So we're talking, 170 odd years ago, 180 years ago, 170 years ago. What's the integration rate with the local population of the Indians that came over from that time? Again, it's around 2%. That's the integration rate. So after 170 years, you've only got 2% integration rate. I mean, what? So we really need to be realistic about this and say that the integration rate will be very low. Now, the counter to that is, well, in 1850, we didn't have the propaganda devices we have now in adverts, computer games, movies, TV shows, and everything. They even pay, I mean, for fuck's sake, they even pay mixed race couples to go to well-known nightclubs and be seen just so they can promote the mixed race thing. That's how far the government goes in funding this propaganda nonsense. But the horse has already bolted. You can't have mass migration and multiculturalism and then go, oh, gee whiz, there's not a whole lot of racial integration. I wonder why. Oh fuck, I don't know. The horse has bolted in this one. You've already laid the complete. All the foundations have been laid for a society that would take many hundreds of years. As in hundreds upon hundreds of years before the integration rate would be noticeable or worthwhile. They're going to stick around in their groups. Now you do see some, but not very much. I was at a train station waiting for a train. Again, you only see it really in public transport, waiting for a train, and there was quite a cultured looking white guy. Oh no, probably lower middle class white guy, but quite a cultured, not a bad looking actually, Chinese girl or Chinese woman. They'd have been, I don't know, late 20s, I would guess. So now, the families stay much more intact. The Chinese divorce rate, the Asian, the Arabic divorce rate, the Indian divorce rate is very, compared to white people, is very, very low. So they don't have the social breakdown, and they have much wider family support groups. For example, if the husband and wife both go to work, there's always relatives of some sort, grandparents or aunties or something like that, who look after the children and who'll run the household, make sure that the food's all there and everything's cooked. So you get these wide, I mean, you have to put up with these people day to day, but there's a much wider network of help and support within the wider family unit. So they're far more cohesive. So why would they step outside of that? What's their incentive to step outside of that? For that matter, what's the incentive of white people to marry? No one's got really any incentive other than the coolness of it all. Now they'll use impossibly good-looking models to do as in the couples that go to the nightclubs. But one in 1,000 people, one in every several hundred people are that good-looking, and people that are universally beautiful, super handsome or something like that, they would always be in demand anyway. You wouldn't need racial integration to achieve that. So really, they've got no plan for it. They've brought in a whole bunch of people. It's all gone off into ghettos and so on. And now they're scratching their heads thinking, well, gee, we really should be thinking about racial integration. They clearly are, because they're throwing vast resources at the propaganda to promote racial integration. I was looking at a show just the night before last, I think it was, and they in the same fucking 40-minute show, they had a mixed race lesbian sex scene. So they've got the black chick with the Mexican chick in a lesbian sex scene. Then they've got the Asian guy with the white guy for the gay sex scene. And then they've got a mixed race trans relationship, and then a mixed race straight relationship, the white guy with the black chick. Oh, fuck. Could you get any more propaganda than that? So this is the so they're working hard at it. They're really pushing it out. And it's obviously from the Central Commissariat because it's all exactly the same format, exactly the same delivery, and exactly the same way all across the Western world simultaneously. So clearly it's the central political commissariat, globalist commissariat that's planning it. But it's showing an almost like an afterthought panic attack of holy crap. Where's this into? We're not getting the racial integration. Did they expect racial integration would occur? I mean, did they imagine it would? I don't know. I certainly I'm very well traveled, on business. So I look at the places that have had for hundreds and hundreds of years, they've had mixed races, as in many races in the place, but there's hardly any race mixing. There's some, but there's not very many. I mean, places like, say, I don't know, Singapore. I'll pick one. The Chinese and the Indians have been living side by side for 250 years in Singapore, but you'd be hard pushed to find any racial integration there. They're, again, very small, 1% or less. It's frowned upon by both communities, so there's no incentive for anyone to do it. And I was there once, and there was a Sri Lankan girl, and from her tribe, and she was complaining that it was really hard to get laid, and she's quite good looking. It's quite hard to get laid because she would only fuck another Sri Lankan guy, and this is not marry the guy, just fuck him, and so she. It just so happened I knew a Sri Lankan guy who was there on business, and so I said, well, actually I can introduce you to somebody. So I did, and they went off that night and did it. So anyway, this is the extent of it, though. She's not even prepared to fuck someone who isn't from the same tribe. So and again, very westernized, as he was, very westernized lady, and yet still sticking to what will be tribal village type mentalities. Now, I don't know if that's ever going to change. I don't think it is. In spite of this massive propaganda blitz, you hardly ever see any mixed race couples. I was out at a shopping centre yesterday and waiting for my wife, and we're delayed waiting for something else to happen. And so I got nearly an hour, well, not an hour, but 45 minutes or so, watching the people go by and just strolling around, killing time. And during that whole time there, I saw one mixed race couple. There was this deadbeat looking guy, dreadlocks, looking like he was drugged out of his skull, and this very working class housing projects, again drugged out of a skull, looking white girl, and they were together and they had this half-caste baby thing happening. But that's hardly going to be those two couple aren't going to be the fucking torchbearers for anything, or an advert for anything. So I don't think the mixed race integration is going to happen. Unless they force it, or I don't use tax incentives or so. And there are things they could do that would help it. Help these things along. Firstly, anyone that's here cannot send back to the country of origin for a bride or a husband. That must be. And if you go away to get married, because you can't stop people from marriage, go away to have an arranged marriage, then it's going to be 15 years before you can come back to Australia. These sorts of things. Citizenship shouldn't be given to somebody until they've married a locally born citizen. Things like of that nature. I mean, some of those things I would shy from because they're a bit draconian. But this idea that unless you're going to intervene and aggressively semi-force people. I mean, you force the white people to accept the mass migration. Why can't you force the brown people and the black people to behave in a certain way? Why not? If it's okay to force the white people, why not? Can't you force the others? So this is but unless there's Western governments are prepared to intervene to those sort of levels, which I am not comfortable with, by the way. But unless they are, then I don't think this racial integration will ever take place. I think if you look at after 170 years, if the Indian integration rate is 1 or 2%, then you could be talking 1,000 years before any appreciable or noticeable integration takes place. I mean, that's a long time. You've been in Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.